Welcome to another episode of Peep Pod. Imagine, imagine pouring your most private, ugly, and vulnerable feelings right into your art.
Right.
And then only to have millions of people suddenly adopt you as their idol. They demand constant access to you, and they consume you as a product.
Which is terrifying.
It really is. And the pressure becomes so intense that right at the very height of your career, you have to walk away from it all just to survive.
Yeah, I mean, it's the central paradox of creating anything in the modern world, isn't it?
Totally.
You create to be understood, but, well, if you are understood by too many people on, like, way too massive a scale, the sheer force of their attention can just completely obliterate your actual humanity.
And that exact tension is what we're going to unpack in today's deep dive. We are looking at the story of Mitski.
Yeah, a fascinating story.
Now, for you listening, if you keep up with indie rock or art pop, you know exactly who she is. I mean, The Guardian went so far as to call her the best young songwriter in the U.S.
That's huge praise.
It is. But before we really get into it, I want to clarify what we are doing today. Because we aren't just reading a Wikipedia page here.
No, not at all.
We've pulled together a massive stack of sources, so interviews, critical reviews, tour diaries, and some really in-depth musical analyses.
And our mission today is to figure out how her story serves as this modern parable, really, about the terrifying realities of going viral.
Exactly.
The cult-like intensity of online fandoms and, well, the fight to keep your humanity when the world just demands to consume you as content.
Because on the surface, this looks like a pretty standard trajectory of an artist hitting it big.
Right, the usual rise to fame.
But when you synthesize these sources, what actually emerges is a genuine survival story. It is this real-time negotiation of boundaries in an era where fans honestly think they own the people they listen to.
They really do.
Let's get right into it. When I was reading through this material, the only way I could really make sense of it was by comparing it to a classic monkey's paw situation.
Oh, I like that analogy.
You know the trope, right? You get exactly what you wish for. So massive musical success, critical acclaim, an audience that deeply connects with your work, but it comes with this twisted, suffocating curse.
Right, there's always a catch.
Always. So here is my big question for you. How does someone who writes such deeply personal, almost like solitary music end up rivaling massive mainstream pop stars in terms of just terrifying fan intensity?
Well, to understand the intensity of the fan base, we first have to understand the specific utility of her music.
Okay, utility, what do you mean by that?
Like, we need to look at the mechanics of what her songs actually do for the listener. In one of the interviews we reviewed, Mitski herself described her music as a place where people can put all their feelings.
Wow.
Yeah, and specifically their ugliness, the stuff that doesn't have a socially acceptable outlet in their own normal lives.
Right, the things you don't say out loud.
Exactly. A critic at The Guardian perfectly characterized this. They called her music a, and I quote, black hole where people dump their feelings.
A black hole where people dump their feelings. That is such a vivid image.
It really is. And we are going to explore how a lifelong outsider accidentally built that black hole, became the center of a generational zeitgeist, broke under the crushing weight of it, and then somehow managed to rebuild her entire career entirely on her own terms.
Okay, so to understand why she was even able to build that emotional black hole, we have to talk about why she felt like an outsider in the first place.
Definitely.
Because I have to say, looking at her background, this is one of the most intense, disorienting origin stories I've ever come across.
It's wild.
It is wild. She was born in 1990 in Japan, but the sheer logistics of her birth are crazy. Her mother, who is Japanese, was heavily pregnant and living in the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Right.
But she wanted to ensure Mitski would have Japanese citizenship.
Yeah, so she literally boards an international flight from the DRC to Japan and, get this, nearly gives birth mid-flight just to make it happen.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. From literally the moment she came into the world, Mitski was in transit.
That's so poetic, but also terrifying.
Right. And that state of transit became the defining feature of her entire childhood. Her father is a white American who worked for the State Department.
Okay.
And because of the nature of that work, the family was just in a state of perpetual relocation.
And perpetual's putting it mildly. She lived in 13 different countries growing up.
13. It's hard to even wrap your head around.
I mean, for you listening, just imagine what that does to a developing brain. You never get to establish roots. You are constantly the new kid.
Always the outsider.
Exactly. You don't learn how to settle down. You learn how to observe and adapt so you just don't stand out. Mitski later recalled that this created a permanent sense of being a foreigner and an outsider.
Which makes total sense.
Right. And it wasn't until she was around 17 or 18, living in Ankara, Turkey, that she finally started songwriting in her spare time, just to cope with it all.
And this is really where the psychology of her songwriting begins. If we look at the phenomenon of third culture kids.
With third culture kids.
Yeah, it's a term for children raised in a culture other than their parents' culture or their own nationality.
Ah, gotcha.
There's often this profound sense of alienation with third culture kids. When you are always the foreigner, you have to develop a highly guarded, incredibly rich internal life.
Because you don't have that external consistency.
Exactly. You don't have a physical neighborhood to anchor you. You don't have those childhood friends you've known for 10 years. So you start building an emotional house to live in instead.
Wow. Emotional house.
Yeah, her songwriting wasn't just a fun hobby. It was a literal mechanism for geographic and emotional survival.
Okay, I hear that, but I have to push back a little on the idea that her music was purely a product of, like, isolation.
Oh, how so?
Because when you look at the sources, all that movement meant her musical influences were actually incredibly diverse. She wasn't just sitting in a quiet room feeling sad.
That's her, yeah.
She was absorbing this eclectic collision of sounds. On one hand, you have her dad's massive Smithsonian Folkways collection.
Which is deep.
Super deep. So you have traditional global and American folk roots. On the other hand, you have her mom's Japanese pop albums.
Right.
And then woven through all of that, she's absorbing these massive American pop stars who were huge internationally, like Mariah Carey.
Quite the mix.
It's almost like linguistic code switching, but for melodies. Which kind of brings up a fascinating question.
Yeah.
If you never have a hometown, does your art become your home?
Oh, I think that's exactly what happened. Her art became the only consistent landscape in her life.
Yeah.
It was a space she could entirely control, unlike her physical environment. But, and this is important, she didn't just intuitively strum her way to greatness, you know?
Right, she wasn't just messing around on an acoustic guitar.
No. To achieve the level of control she wanted, she actually underwent a very rigorous academic journey. She wasn't relying on raw talent. She wanted the technical vocabulary to build that home properly.
So let's trace how that academic foundation was laid, because it sets up a major turning point later in the story.
Okay, let's do it.
She eventually lands in the U.S. permanently around age 15, finishes high school, and moves to New York in 2010.
Right.
Initially, she actually enrolls at Hunter College to major in film.
Oh, I didn't realize she started in film.
Yeah, but she drops out after a year. And the reason is fascinatingly pragmatic. She just didn't see enough creative job prospects in the film industry.
Wow, so she pivots.
She pivots, and she transfers to Purchase College to study music composition.
And that distinction, studying composition rather than just like vocal performance, is really crucial.
Yeah, she's writing the music.
Exactly. She wasn't just playing open mic nights at a coffee shop. She was studying the actual architecture of music. And at Purchase, she had access to institutional resources, specifically full recording studios, and this huge network of classically trained student musicians.
Which she totally took advantage of.
Oh, absolutely. She used those resources to self-release her first two albums. There was Lush in 2012, and then her incredibly ambitious second album, Retired from Sad, New Career in Business.
Which is an amazing title, by the way.
It really is. And for that second record, she actually utilized a 60-person student orchestra.
Let's just pause and think about that for a second. A 60-person orchestra.
Yeah.
For the college students project.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to write sheet music for the strings, the brass, the woodwinds. You have to manage 60 different human beings.
It's basically running a small company.
Right. It requires this massive amount of logistical and theoretical precision. But here's where the narrative takes a really sharp turn.
Okay.
She graduates in 2013, she moves to Brooklyn, and suddenly that whole institutional safety net vanishes. She is just an independent musician trying to survive in one of the most expensive cities on the planet.
Yeah, Brooklyn is not cheap.
No. And shocker, she doesn't have a private 60-piece orchestra at her disposal anymore.
The resources dry up instantly. So what does a classically trained composer do when the symphony is just taken away from her?
What did you do?
She has to rely on that adaptability she learned from moving across 13 countries. She teaches herself how to play the guitar.
I love this transition so much. It's like a superhero suddenly losing their powers and realizing they have to learn bare-knuckle boxing to survive.
That is a great analogy.
Or To use a different one, it's like a master chef who is used to a 3 Michelin-star kitchen being thrown into a tiny studio apartment with a microwave and like a rusty knife.
And they still have to make a gourmet meal.
Exactly.
And she does it.
She really does. She took the architectural knowledge of a composer and squeezed it through the limitations of a cheap guitar and a distortion pedal.
Wow.
And that limitation is what birthed her 2014 album Bury Me at Makeout Creek, which, fun fact, is actually named after a quote by Milhouse from The Simpsons.
That is hilarious. I had no idea.
Right. But that album marks a radical stylistic shift for her. The music becomes gritty, it's guitar-driven, and it's heavily influenced by indie punk rock.
Yeah, one of the reviews we looked at, I think it was from Stereogum, called it a major turning point, noting that this was the album where she finally, quote, let out her rage.
You can absolutely feel it. As a listener, you totally feel it. But it's a very specific kind of rage. It's not sloppy. It's the precision of a classical composer, dictating exactly how and when the raw energy of punk is deployed.
Exactly. It's controlled chaos.
And it works brilliantly. It puts her on the map critically. She follows it up with Puberty 2 in 2016 and Be the Cowboy in 2018.
And this is where we start to see her sound evolve yet again. By the time Be the Cowboy arrives, she's pulling back a bit from the raw punk guitars and incorporating a lot more pop and electronic instrumentation.
And the critics go wild for it.
The critical response is overwhelming. Pitchfork, Vulture, Consequence, they all name Be the Cowboy their album of the year.
Incredible.
She had reached the absolute pinnacle of the indie music world, but while the critics were praising her songcraft, a completely different algorithmic monster was waking up.
Oh boy. The TikTok explosion.
Yeah.
Okay, I need you to explain the mechanics of this to me. Because an indie darling getting good reviews is one thing. But suddenly, her songs, specifically Nobody and Washing Machine Heart, go absolutely viral on TikTok. We're talking about her music being used in over 2.5 million videos.
Millions.
Millions of teenagers lip-syncing to her deepest, most solitary lyrics. How does that leap even happen?
Well, it happens because of how social media algorithms intersect with adolescent psychology.
Yep.
TikTok doesn't just promote catchy songs, it promotes sounds that users can project their own identities onto.
Right, they act it out.
Exactly. And Mitski's lyrics are incredibly specific about feelings of intense isolation, yearning, and inadequacy.
Which is basically the definition of being a teenager.
Exactly. When you take a lyric that perfectly articulates the crushing loneliness of being a teen and you feed it into an algorithm designed to reward hyper-relatable emotional performance, it just goes off like a bomb.
So it's not just that they like the beat, it's that they're using her song as a literal avatar for their own trauma.
That's exactly it.
Which brings us to the dark side of this fandom, because the sources we reviewed paint a really disturbing picture of what happens when that algorithmic connection bleeds into real life.
It gets very dark.
Journalists describe this new fan base as extremely online and cultish. And that's not hyperbole. Back in 2016, she had to completely quit Tumblr.
Yeah, that was awful.
Why? Because teenagers were sending her messages threatening to physically harm themselves if she didn't respond to them.
It's emotional blackmail.
It is. For you listening, just imagine waking up, checking your phone, and suddenly carrying the weight of a stranger's life because they've decided you are their only savior.
That is the darkest manifestation of a parasocial relationship.
Explain that term a bit more.
A parasocial relationship is basically a one-sided bond where a fan feels they intimately know a public figure, while the public figure obviously doesn't even know the fan exists.
Right.
Because Mitski's music is so emotionally naked, the fans felt entitled to her actual self. They weren't treating her as a musician anymore.
What were they treating her as?
They were treating her as a therapist, a deity, and a hostage all at once. They were projecting their entire psychological well-being onto a woman they had never even met.
And it wasn't just happening on screens either. It started manifesting physically in real life.
The dressing room incident.
Yes. There's this chilling anecdote from a 2022 interview where she talked about just trying to get to her dressing room after a show.
Yeah.
She had to walk through the crowd unescorted, and she described the audience as unrelenting. She literally said, everyone needed a piece of me.
That sounds like a zombie movie.
It does. She was so overwhelmed by dozens of hands physically grabbing at her that she just burst into tears. And to add another layer of immense pressure onto all this, she is an Asian American woman navigating the historically white space of indie rock.
Which is a whole other burden.
She spoke about feeling this crushing burden to represent her entire community, knowing that any mistake she made would just be projected onto other Asian American artists.
This is where we really see a profound psychological disconnect between the artist's intent and the audience's consumption.
Yes.
Well, Mitski explicitly stated that she wanted to create a container like a safe space for feelings that don't have a place in normal life. The shame, the destructive impulses, just the absolute ugliness of being human.
Right, the black hole.
Exactly. But instead of just utilizing the container to process their own emotions, the fan base began worshiping the creator of the container.
Wow.
And when you are placed on a pedestal made of other people's trauma, you can't move without disappointing someone. That toxic environment began to severely damage her own self-image.
Which accelerates us to the absolute darkest turning point in this story.
Yeah, 2019.
It's 2019. The pressure is already unsustainable. And then a Tumblr user just weaponizes the internet against her.
Unbelievable.
This user completely fabricates horrific allegations accusing Mitski of being involved in a child sex trafficking ring.
It's just insane.
Let me be absolutely clear to everyone listening. These were entirely baseless, completely fabricated lies.
100% false.
But they caught fire online. Mitski, who had already fled social media for her own sanity, was forced to temporarily return to Twitter in August of 2019, just to publicly deny this insane hoax.
We really need to look at the mechanics of why a fan base would even do this.
Yeah, why turn on her like that?
When a creator establishes boundaries like stepping back from social media, a toxic fandom often feels a loss of control.
Okay.
To regain that control, or honestly, to punish the creator for creating distance, they will weaponize morality against them.
That is so twisted.
It's the ultimate violation. You give an audience your deepest emotional truth, and a segment of that audience tries to destroy your character just to force you to acknowledge them.
Wow.
Even after the claims were entirely discredited, the psychological toll of realizing your own fans would try to ruin your life is unfathomable.
And it pushed her completely over the edge. Just a few weeks later, on September 9, 2019, she plays a massive show at Central Park Summer Stage.
Yeah.
From the stage, she announces to the crowd that this will be her, quote, last show indefinitely.
And the fans freaked out.
Naturally, the internet goes into full meltdown mode. So to calm people down, she posts a gentle walk back online, saying she's not quitting music entirely, just stepping away for a while.
Right.
But when you cross-reference her later interviews, she actually was quitting, wasn't she?
She absolutely was. She later confessed to Rolling Stone that her genuine intention that night in Central Park was to walk away from the music industry forever and, in her words, find another life.
Because she just couldn't take it.
Exactly. She had reached a critical realization about the core machinery of the music business. She described it as a super-saturated version of consumerism.
This blew my mind when I read it.
Yeah.
Yeah, she realized that it doesn't matter how pure or sad or meaningful your art is. In that system, eventually, you become the product.
You are the product.
The fans weren't just buying her albums. They were buying her identity. She even expressed deep regret over using her real name, Mitski Miyawaki, for her career.
Because they took it from her.
Yes. She felt that the name no longer belonged to her. It belonged to the machine. Think about the tragic irony here.
It's heartbreaking.
The young girl who grew up moving through 13 different countries, constantly feeling like a foreigner, had finally built a home in her art, only to become a foreigner to herself all over again because millions of people had moved in and claimed ownership of it.
It's a devastating cycle. She built an emotional sanctuary, and the public invaded it, commodified it, and effectively evicted her from her own identity.
Evicted from her own identity. That's exactly it.
She was terrified that if she stayed in the industry, the machine would force her to start mass-producing fake vulnerability just to keep the content churn going. So to save her soul, she quit.
But as we know, she didn't stay gone.
No, she didn't.
And the reason she came back is one of those deeply unromantic, gritty details that usually gets cut from Hollywood biopics.
I love this detail.
She didn't return to the studio in 2020 because she had a sudden, joyous burst of creative inspiration.
Yep.
She returned because she had a contract. She was legally obligated by her record label, Dead Oceans, to deliver one more album.
The machinery of the industry demanded its product.
Exactly.
She was legally bound to return to the very environment that had just broken her. But what makes Mitski a generational talent is how she metabolized that reality.
Tell me about that.
During her hiatus, as she was dreading this forced return, she wrote a track called Working for the Knife.
Oh, wow.
It is a stunning, self-aware critique of everything we're discussing. The knife is the industry, the expectations, the relentless demand for production. She took her resentment of the system and forged it into the art itself.
Okay, hold on. I'm trying to wrap my head around this.
Yeah.
She has to go back on tour. She has to face the fans who completely overwhelmed her. But she knows she can't just stand there and bleed for them every night like she used to.
No, she can't survive that.
So how does someone fundamentally change their relationship with a live audience while still delivering a compelling show? Like, how did she adapt to survive this time?
She survived by erecting a highly stylized physical boundary. Specifically, she turned to Buto.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought this up.
It's fascinating.
For you listening who might not be familiar, Buto is this incredibly intense, avant-garde dance theater style that originated in post-war Japan.
Right.
It is known for being extremely slow, hyper-controlled, and often quite grotesque or unsettling.
Yeah.
It is like the exact opposite of a spontaneous pop star dance routine.
Exactly. And by utilizing Buto choreography during her live shows, Mitski found a way to externalize her emotions physically. But crucially, it was rehearsed and heavily guarded.
It wasn't raw anymore.
Right. It wasn't a raw, unscripted offering of her soul to the crowd. It was a deliberate theatrical performance of emotion. The Buto acted as a literal physical shield.
Wow.
It allowed her to perform without being consumed.
And she didn't just build physical boundaries on stage. She started setting very firm, very public verbal boundaries, too.
Oh, the phone statement.
Yes. In early 2022, she posted a statement boldly asking her fans to put their phones away and stop filming her shows.
Which is a bold move these days.
Very bold. She explained that when she is on stage trying to share a moment, and she looks out at a sea of glass screens, it makes her feel as though she is just being consumed as content.
Yeah.
She was literally begging them to treat her as a human sharing a space,
Yeah.
rather than like an interactive exhibit.
It is such a vital distinction for the digital age because content is something you passively consume, right?
Right.
But a moment is something you actively share.
Perfectly said.
By demanding that her audience put down their screens, she was actively fighting the algorithmic conditioning of her own fan base. She was demanding her humanity back.
And you would think, in today's cancel culture hyper-entitled landscape, that telling your fans no would ruin your career.
You'd think so, yeah.
But the most incredible part of this entire deep dive is that drawing those firm boundaries actually propelled her to unprecedented heights.
She skyrocketed.
She achieved massive success, but entirely on her own terms. Her 2023 album, The Land is Inhospitable and So Are We, yielded her first ever Billboard Hot 100 hit with the song My Love Mine, All Mine.
Which was huge.
Massive. It also dominated the TikTok charts, but this time she was insulated from it.
And her influence expanded far beyond just indie music, too.
Oh yeah, tell them about the other projects.
So she co-wrote music for the cultural phenomenon Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Love that movie.
Me too. And that earned her an Academy Award nomination. She was also tapped to write the music and lyrics for a Broadway adaptation of The Queen's Gambit.
That's wild.
It really proved that you don't have to sacrifice your boundaries to achieve peak cultural relevance.
And she's still keeping us on our toes, by the way.
Always.
Just recently, in October 2025, she released a massive live concert film that played in over 600 cinemas globally.
Huge release.
And then in early 2026, she wiped her Instagram entirely clean. No warnings, just cryptic teasers.
Classic artist move.
Totally. And then she shocked everyone by dropping a brand new 8th studio album in February 2026 called Nothing's About to Happen to Me.
A great title.
So good. And it was met with universal acclaim, NME, The Guardian 5 stars across the board.
Incredible.
So taking all these sources, all this history, all the pain and the triumph, how do we synthesize her journey? What is the core truth here?
Well, if we look at the entire arc of Mitski's career, I think it stands as a profound rebuke to the entitlement of the digital age.
Absolutely.
We have been conditioned to believe that we deserve total access to the people who make the things we love. But Mitski's journey proves that while art is meant to be shared, the artists themselves is not a public utility.
Man, that hits hard. Not a public utility.
It's true. She stared down the absolute worst aspects of modern fame, the toxic demands of parasocial fandom, the algorithmic commodification of her trauma, and the relentless machinery of the industry itself.
Yep.
She drew a line in the sand, reclaimed her identity, and somehow emerged more creatively revered than ever.
It truly is a masterclass in survival. She refused to let the world turn her into a product. And in protecting her humanity, she basically became an icon.
Well said.
Which brings us all the way back to the tension we started with today. We live in an ecosystem that constantly pushes us to capture, post, and consume every person and every moment we encounter.
Everything is content.
Right.
Yeah.
But when we do that, we risk destroying the very thing we find beautiful. So I want to leave you listening with this thought.
Yeah.
The next time you are at a show and you pull out your phone to record a special moment, just pause and ask yourself, are you actually trying to connect with the person on stage, or are you just consuming them?
That's a great question to leave on.
Thanks for listening to Pay Play L Pod. Keep tuning in for more stories worth knowing.